Okay, this space that I'm going to call the spaces we are meant to leave is dedicated to a very dear friend of mine whom I just spoke to, got off the conversation, and I'm trying to sit with this and answer this situation for myself because it is my truth too, right? And so, how do we know when a season is over? Because life rarely sends us a formal notice, right? Instead, it begins with quiet nudges, a feeling that something isn't quite right, a growing conflict between what matters to us and what we're in real experiencing, that loss of energy and enthusiasm, and probably even a gradual disengagement from things that once mattered deeply. For me, that's how it usually begins. Not with certainty, not with grand revelation, just small signs. I stop fighting for things that would once have cared for. I would stop speaking up. I become quieter. What once felt important starts feeling exhausting. And perhaps the most telling sign of all is I stop imagining what could be possible. But that's where I've learned that, leaving isn't the hard part. Knowing is. Because once you know, you have to face that uncomfortable truth that something needs to change. And that's where most of us get stuck. Not because we don't know, not because we don't see it, but because we do. We start negotiating. Maybe this will get better. Maybe this is not that bad. Maybe I should be grateful because others would die for what I have. And perhaps my favorite one, if it's really the time to leave, why can't I see what's next? And beneath all those questions, there's usually one fear quietly sitting in the background. And that's the fear of the unknown. The fear of letting go of an identity we've worn for so long that we've forgotten who we are without it. And then when that fear takes over, we stay. Even when something within us has already begun to leave. I've come to realize that when we stay too long, we don't just lose opportunities, but we lose pieces of ourselves. And for me, it was my excitement, my energy, my willingness to fight for what mattered to me, and my ability to dream. And perhaps most painfully, that slow erosion of respect for myself. Because every time I ignored what I knew, I was teaching myself that my truth could wait, that everyone else's comfort mattered more than my own knowing. And slowly the distance between who I was and who I was becoming grew wider. And here's what life has taught me. When we ignore the whispers, life eventually stops whispering. It stops negotiating. It becomes really loud. The discomfort just grows. The tension magnifies. And the misalignment just is so unsettling. Until staying becomes harder than leaving. And then one day we finally find that reason, that event, a circumstance, and a justification. Something we can point out and say, that's why I left. But deep down, we knew it. We had already left long before that day had arrived. You know what? I think about this, right? Nature never questions its process. Trees shed, their leaves, snakes shed their skin, birds lose their feathers. Probably they pick their own feathers in certain seasons. The caterpillar doesn't stay inside the cocoon because it feels safer there. Everything in nature seems to understand this, that growth requires letting go. Not because the old season was wrong, but because it has completed its purpose. And maybe we are no different. Maybe some spaces are meant to shelter us. Some spaces are meant to shape us. And some spaces are meant to prepare us for what comes next. But the mistake is not that we enter them. The mistake is believing in that we must stay there forever. Because growth has a way of making old spaces seem smaller. And maybe the greatest act of self-trust is recognizing that gratitude and departure can coexist. You can appreciate what a space gave you and still know it's time to leave. Because leaving is not always walking away from something. Sometimes it's finally walking towards what is good for you in the new season of your life. And maybe the question isn't, what if I leave and it doesn't work out? The real question might be, what more might life be trying to give me if only I was willing to leave?